Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel and to our three-part series on the build on this Cobalt 5.7 gallon aquarium. So what I wanted to go over with you today is the products that we're using and get started on this build. So the first thing I want to talk about is the substrate for this. The substrate in this build is going to be something that I use all the time. It's a great product. Fluval does not endorse me. I don't want you to think that they do. They don't. They should, but they don't. Anyways, Fluval Stratum is a great product. It's full of nutrients. It really gets plants off to a great start. And they do a really, really good job of making an amazing product here that I've never ever had any complaints about it in the time that I have been building aquariums. This is pretty much my go-to product, and I really like it a lot. I really do. I have found, however, with this product that it's a very dark product. So if your fish are needing something less than a dark product, you have to really pay attention to what your fish need. I like this because the fish show up better in the background. That's a really cool thing. All of their colors and everything pop against the darker background. Now this is not a black product. It's pretty much a really, really dark chocolate. As if you were to look at dark chocolate, that's what it would look like. So it's a good product, and we're going to be using that for this build, and we'll be getting to that in just a few minutes. Now the next thing I want to talk about is this stone right here. And I screwed up and dropped it on my hardwood floors down here, and I dented my floors, so I'm not real happy about that, but I guess that's part of the problems with using stone and having a limited amount of space to do this. This has really become kind of my studio over here to do this. Now, Dragonstone, if you're not familiar with it, it's a very soft stone, so it breaks very easily. If you have a piece this big, which I may have to take part of this off the bottom, and that's easily done by chipping away at it with a hammer. And if we get to that point and we need to do that, that's what I'll do. But the idea of this stone is going to be to sort of make a mountainous, let me just kind of show you what I mean by this. This may sit like this in the back. I don't know for sure that this is what I'm going to do, but this is an idea that I'm having right now based on playing around with this a little bit last night and sort of getting it. Now it's hard to position it without any substrate in there, but what I'm going to be trying to do is trying to get some of these pieces to sit. Let me show you here so that you can see. I'll back out of the way of the camera. Hopefully you can see this. Pieces like this to sit in here. That helps to keep that in there. And it starts to look like sort of a cliff type area. Now, this is a lot of rock for a very small aquarium like that, but this is the whole idea behind this aquarium, is to give it a look of cliffs. Let's say we're going to put this piece maybe over here, and as you can see, we start to see our rule of thirds, or our golden I can't think of the word right now, but anyway, the golden ratio. We start to see our golden ratio working its way in that direction. Now, some of these smaller pieces, it really is just a matter of fitting them around in here as best you can to give them that sense of a three-dimensional look, or a look of depth in here. So I would never use any more than this that I've got right here. This will all, of course, stand up much better once there is some substrate in here. But you see the idea that we're going for here. Now, this is a little bit too much rock, and you always want to have odd pieces of rock, especially when you're using a small area like this. I've talked about this in other videos, but I'm going to go over it again just simply because it's necessary to do that. And I want to check one thing here before I do anything else. And I wanted to make sure my camera was on. I was very concerned. I've done that a couple of times here, and I don't want to do that again. But anyways, you can see what we're working with here, and you can also see that the look that we're going for. Now, this may be too much rock, so this bigger piece in the back, because you're not going to have a lot of room for fish. Now, this is going to either be an invertebrate tank and a snail tank and strictly that. I don't know yet. I really haven't decided what I'm going to do, or we're going to have some extremely small fish in here. In behind this rock is about a space about this big, so there's a lot of room in here still. But there is a lot of rock in here, so we're going to have to figure out the design on this thing as we go along and kind of see if we need to scale back on the rock a little bit. And I love Dragonstone because of the colors of it. Wash your Dragonstone really, really, really well before you use it, and I will tell you why. It will, number one, make your water very foggy and dirty, and number two, it's a very soft rock. So if you're screwing around with this stuff and having to pull it back out and whatever, or it has any kind of oils on it, which it tends to do because it's kind of like a clay type rock, so you can get the appearance of an oil slick on the top of it. Your aquarium, that is not anything to be concerned about. It's very natural and will go away within a few weeks of cycling your tank. Now, as we talked about, we are going to try to cycle this tank the most natural way we can. I think that's a great idea since we've got all this time on our hands to do it. So that's kind of where I'm going with this right now. But as you can see, this has a sort of look to it that we're trying to always achieve when we're putting an aquarium together like that, a look of depth. In other words, like a three-dimensional look. Now, by the time we get substrate in here up to here and even higher in the back, we'll probably do this one as a high corner. This stone is going to become extremely high if we do that, or we're going to have to bury it really far into the soil. I'm not sure how we're going to work with that yet. I'm a little bit concerned about breaking that piece because I like it a lot, and I'm afraid that if I hit it the wrong way, it could crack straight up and down, and then we've got a big mess on our hands and a piece of rock that has been destroyed. So I'm not sure how we're going to work around that yet, but we are certainly going to look at that very carefully before we do anything else. So what we're going to start doing here in just a few minutes after we take a break here is we're going to start adding some of the substrate to this and get that part of it going. And so everybody, welcome back. And so the next phase of this, actually I want to show you a little something here. This is a piece of wood that I've been thinking about putting in here. And there's some problems with this. I already broke this off to make it look natural because it had a sawed-off looking piece at the top here. That doesn't look natural, so I did break the tips off some of these to make it look more natural. But the problem we're going to have is with all this stone, you know, how is that wood going to fit into the scenario here? Now, we do have a couple of different options with this thing of how we're going to set this in here, and it probably is going to go more like about like that, with it setting against the top of that larger stone. And I'm going to just sort of see if that does work or not. If it doesn't, we're going to have to go to plan B here, and we got to be careful not to scratch our glass. That's one of the main things that can happen here is scratching glass. I actually think that that's going to work. I do. I think it's got lots of places for things to weave in and out. So I think I'm going to go with that. You want to look at things at different angles because your substrate is got to cover some of these sawed areas, or it's not going to have a natural look to it. So you got to be really careful that what is sticking up out of the tank that you're visually going to see is either going to be covered by substrate or stone or a combination of the both. So I like the way this leans up against this. That looks nice. It looks interesting. And so we may go with that. Let's take a couple of these other pieces that we talked about putting in here and seeing if this actually will come together or not. And yeah, I think that that's going to look good there. I like the way that looks. So we'll continue to mess with this a little bit until we get it exactly the way we want it. And then we'll take what I like to do is once I've got everything put together the way I like it, the next thing I want to do is take a picture of this just to make sure that the design that I liked and the pieces, the way I put them in, make the thing pop the way I want it. Take a picture of it so I don't forget in any way, shape, or form how I have displayed this, and if I like it, I can just put it right back the way it is, because this has all got to come back out of here for our substrate and that sort of thing. So we're going to talk about that in a few minutes, but I really think if we do this the right way, which is, I think the best way is the way we have it right here. We're not going to be having the wood standing above the lid part on this, so it's going to look really good, I think. Now, there's not going to be a ton of room in this tank, and I said that earlier, and I understand that, you know, we're just going to be dealing with what we're dealing with. We want to get these other rocks in here as well to give that continued sense of depth, and then we'll have this piece here probably be our last piece that'll go in here on this side. And as you can see, you've got that just natural flow that just looks really nice. Now I do have a couple of extra pieces over here that I thought about incorporating. There's a possibility of covering some of this up over here on the sides by the time we get our substrate in there, so that we don't have these sawed off looking areas that don't look right. This is going to be hard to, by the time we actually get stuff in here, it may be okay. It may be okay to use this in the way that I'm thinking here. Yeah, there you go. So that's kind of like a puzzle. I mean, this fits really nicely in that little corner down there. Now, it is going to be hard to clean something like this, and you know, you just have to tell yourself, am I willing to put up with the idea that I may have to move some things around to clean, or just accept the idea that you're not going to get down real deep on the sides of this tank to clean it. So anyways, the next step on this is to start building it, and we're going to get at that right now in just a few minutes here. Well, as you can see, I've moved this aquarium to another part of the house, which I think is going to be better for showing you the way that this substrate is going to go in here. Unfortunately, I had a lot of glare in the other room in the studio, so we're going to use this room to show you what we're going to do with the substrate in here. So let's just get to that. So welcome back, and as you can see, I did have to take the aquarium out of the studio here because of the glare. So we had a little special effect thing going on there, and kind of fun, but kind of gimmicky too. But at the same time, it was something you were able to see is the substrate and the color of it and the richness of it, which I thought was kind of cool to look at. And now we're back in the studio here where we can continue on working with this. Just a second, I need to turn a light on here. Just give us a little bit more light in the room here. Sorry about that. Anyways, so now some of the most essential tools that you're going to have when you're doing a build like this to move this substrate around. And this is something, man, I need a haircut, man. You know, being stuck in the house like this, it's like you can't even get a haircut. I suppose I could pay somebody $1,000 on the side to sneak them into my house, but then you're taking a chance that, you know, you did that and you got sick. So, you know, the hair is what the hair is. But anyway, getting back to it, what I was saying is this right here this is a paintbrush that I have been using for a very long time, and I use it for almost every single build. It's got war wounds on it like you would not believe. It's never been used for painting. It's all scratched up and you know, chipped away because this is wood. But anyways, this is going to be your best friend when you're doing a build like this, and I'm going to show you why. Because what we're going to do is we're going to move this substrate around, and we're going to move the heavier parts of this substrate to the back of the aquarium. And what we're going to do is have most of the higher parts of this substrate in the back corner here, because this is where we want our substrate to come up and have its own angle, so to speak. So we're going to build into this corner. We're going to build into this corner. As you can see, it's getting higher, and most of the substrate is going up this way, and we're getting away from all the substrate down at the bottom here, because as you can see, when we took our picture earlier, the rocks don't need much substrate around them. Now we may have to fill in some areas, which I have extra. Now I thought about using a product of sand here, made by Imaginarium. I had it sitting around here. It's not a white sand, it's sort of a beige colored sand, and I thought about putting a pathway through here, but because of the wood, yeah, that didn't quite work out. Now I could leave the wood out of here, but I haven't really decided what I'm going to do yet. I think I'm going to kind of build this thing and see how it goes, and then make a decision on whether or not I'm going to use that wood in here, or if I'm just going to make a pathway and make it look like these really cool cliffs with a pathway of sand leading down into this area here. And I'm not sure if I'm going to do that yet or not, but I did have that there just in case I decided to do that. I'm going to need my glasses for a minute because I cannot see what I'm doing here. But we're going to get all of this worked in up in here. And we're going to make this, like I said, natural progression of rock, or substrate I should say, down through here, and just make it look as naturally pointed to the back corner right here where our big stones are going to go. And we're just going to do the best we can. Perfection, I don't want perfection. I want this thing to look as natural as it can. Now we want our lines down here to look somewhat uniform, just because it gives us a sense of where things start and where things end, and that's a good thing to want to achieve. But other than that, we don't need anything to be exactly perfect. And as you can see, I just kind of take the badge that's on here, the Cobalt badge, and use it as a sort of a template for where I'm going to have this substrate end down at the bottom here. So we've got that in there, and now we're going to be building our stone in here in a way This is sitting a little precarious here, but I think it's going to be okay because I think once we get the heavier weight in the back of this, that we are going to be able to get the weight shifted back there. There's no chance. I mean, there's only like less than an inch of overhang on this, on the edge here. I don't have a lot of room to work with. We're working on a new studio right now. Won't be done for a couple of months or maybe longer because of the situation that we're in. But I'm hoping that we're going to be able to get that done, and it's going to be really, really cool. It's going to be a cool situation, I think, by the time we finish with it, and I think you're going to like it. But for now, it's my office and my studio office, and that's what we got to work with, so that's what we will work with. So what we're going to do is we're going to take our first piece of stone, the one that we talked about, in here, and we are going to put that in the back here, and we're going to use the substrate to sort of hold that in and then lean it up against the back of the tank. Now, what you want to do is try to bury that down into the substrate as much as you can, and then go along again with your brush and sort of move things naturally up against this, and try to get it to be as natural looking as you possibly can without disturbing the stone. You want to make it look like this is going to just be cascading downwards, and the rest of the stones, when we put them in here, we're going to probably have to do the same thing where we move things around. So I think I'm going to just keep my glasses on because I can see better. The next piece of stone we're going to do is this piece right here, which is where I drew some, or took a picture and made sure that I knew exactly where these pieces were going to go. And that piece there we decided was going to go there. And then this third piece here looked very natural sitting over in this area here, which gives us a sense of depth. As you can see, there's that sense of depth going on now. Now, here's where it gets a little bit tricky, because this piece of wood has to go in next, because the other stones that we're using with it are going to be very, very difficult to work with if we do not get this in here and the way that we want it to sit. The problem we're going to run into is this piece of stone here has to go back further in order for this to lean properly against here, because we're above the rise here, and I don't know how we get around that. This is the part that is going to be interesting in how we continue this in a way that looks natural, and that's the part that's going to be a problem. We may have to trim off a few of these pieces again, and I'm not too sure about that, or we may not use any wood in here at all. I mean, this is sort of a work in progress. Like I said, these are things that I had around my house that I decided to use, but we may just not use wood in this one, and we may just end up using these stones in a cascading manner and planting around them, and that may be our scape. But what I'm trying to do right now is see if it's going to be possible to raise this stone up into the back here in a way that helps this to lay down and voila, we have it. We have it. So we now have this piece of wood sitting in a manner that is going to be workable. So in other words, we're going to go around. We're going to use the paintbrush to just sort of brush around everything as far as trying to make it as natural looking as we can. We kind of screwed up our line in the front here, but that's okay, because what we want is for it to look as natural as possible. If you get into a situation like I'm getting into right now where you cannot hide some of what you're trying to do, then brush some of the stone that's up in this area down in here and try to pack it in as best you can and get that nice straight line that you want in the front here. And you know, just sort of push it, tap it down. That's what this paintbrush is so great for, because you can do so much with it. You can pack things down and make them look as natural as you possibly can, and without losing the look that you're trying to go for here. Now, we need a little bit down in this area here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get a cup and I'm going to pour some right around that area so that we have the ability to yes, I do step out of rooms and I go and get things. So anyways, yeah, we're going to need a little cup here with some of the substrate in here. And what we're going to do with that is we're going to go like this and pour some of that into that area. It's a little bit too much, but that's easily fixed. We can just take our brush and tap it down and get the lines where they're supposed to be with this. It just takes a little work is all it does. It just takes a little work to sort of get this natural. Now, if you're having trouble with it, this is a great tool for moving this stuff around and packing it in and getting it exactly the way you want it without losing your well, losing your cool is one of the things you could do, and then the other thing is losing you know, the design that you want here by having things not cooperate with you. But I think we got that, and we'll just go in there with the brush and pat things down and then just sort of move this along so that it looks more even. And again, just try to make it look as natural as you possibly can with the flow of the substrate looking very, very natural. And as you can see, we've really pretty much achieved that by just going along with the brush here and sort of messing around with it. Now, basically, at this point here, we have to look at the rocks that we have left over. And we had a couple of different scenarios. And I did keep these for different sides so that I knew where I was going to go with these. And of course, we're going to totally screw up our look here in a minute again, because we're going to be pushing that stone down in there to give it that sense of that depth look, which is really cool looking, I think. And again, we're going to do the same thing over here and try to get this to fit in there. Remember how this fit in kind of like a puzzle piece here? But we want to be careful that we don't scratch the glass of the aquarium. So that's down in there. We're going to take our tool here and we're going to work this a bit so that we can get it back to looking more natural like we did before. And then we're going to take our brush and go in there and do the same thing again, yet again. And try to get it as natural looking as we possibly can. And as you can see, it's not real hard to do. It's this corner here may be a little bit more difficult to work with because it's very tight down in there. But we have tricks for everything. This piece of wood here, contraption that I have here, works really good for pushing down in these very tight little corners and getting everything to look nice and uniform. And as you can see, that took seconds really to fix that. Now, it doesn't have to be a perfect line. As I said, you know, you want to get it to be as much of a nice line in the front here as you possibly can, but it's not going to look perfect. It's just not. And now we're going to try to work in some more stone over here on this side. I don't like the way this looks. I think that's a little bit better right there. You want the scale of the stone, because this is Dragonstone, to have its own natural sort of look to it. So now we're going to try to put this piece in here to give it even more sense of depth. And we're going to do that by, you know, just setting it in here as best we can. And we do have some cut lines in here from the saw. This doesn't bother me so much. This side is going to be an issue, and we're going to have to figure out which stone works best to cover that up. And I think that's going to be this guy right here, and that is exactly what we needed there. Now we have a rock coming forward. That's okay. It gives it that sense of depth, and it's all right that you know, that we are using it that way. Now this one here, I'm going to use back here because I want to try to use up this stone as best I can. And again, this gives this another layer of depth that is cascading downwards. This is higher than this other piece here, as you can see. And what we're going to do is we're going to just take our substrate and we're going to pour it in here and try to fill in some of these areas. And we're going to need a little bit more to actually get this exactly the way we want it, but that's okay. We're going to use up as much of it as we need to get the look that we need. Down around the edges here, and in the front here along the edges, same thing. We want to get as much of it in there as we possibly can, and make it look as natural as we possibly can without overloading it in the sense that, you know, we put too much. Now, our line in the front is going to get higher, and that's just the way it's going to be because of the way this is sort of taken on, the look that it's taken on here. So what we're going to do is we're going to go in here with the brush again, and we're going to work our way around this soil, or substrate, I should say. And I may have to break off some of these little pieces. Like I said, Dragonstone is very, very fragile stone. It's a very fragile stone, so it's easy to break it. It's not hard to break it into pieces that are workable. And right here I need a piece because if you're going to look at it from this side view, we don't want to see these cut lines where somebody cut this. You know, when you get pieces of wood and things like that, they're not going to be perfect. In fact, they're going to look man-made or managed in a way that somebody cut it, and it's going to be real obvious. And your job is basically going to be to hide that stuff. So I'm looking at this here. It's not too bad over here, not too bad. But at the same time, I don't like the idea that, you know, we're seeing this little cut line, as I said. So the best thing that we can do at this point is to take some smaller pieces of the Dragonstone by breaking it up, just breaking it up enough to where it looks uniform, so to speak. And we'll do that in a second here. I just want to get these lines in here as best I can in the front of this. I hope I'm not blocking your view here, but I want to get these lines as best I can to look as natural as I can so that they look nice and tight. Down in this corner here, I think I'm going to pour just a little bit more of this in here to fill in that little bit of area and pack it down. And we'll do that just by doing this, and yeah, see, perfect. It takes away any flaws in the wood that were visible, and it looks very natural. Everything is a very natural line here. We do the same thing over in this corner. We're gonna pour some stone over in this corner, and we're gonna work it in. And don't worry about that. We can get this all off here and work it in, like I said. And I feel like Bob Ross. You know how Bob had that nice, quiet little voice, and You know, we're going to put a little tree over here, and our little bush is going to live over here, and our little stream is. I love the guy. He was a cool guy. But I don't want to sound like him. I'm not trying to do that on purpose. I'm just basically talking that way because it's sort of the natural instinct to sort of talk softly when you're doing something like this because it is relaxing. To me, it's all about the build. It's not about, let me say this correctly. It's about the build to me because there's creativity in the build. It's not so much about just throwing a fish tank together and, you know, going, wow, you know, I threw a fish tank together. It's really not about that at all. It's really more about the idea that you came up with what I think is a really, really cool look for this tank. Now, it's not perfect, but we don't want perfection. Nature doesn't reward perfection. Nature rewards the natural flow of things, and that is so important that we get that right, because it is something that we want to achieve in the end. Is if you look at all of these tanks, we want them to look as natural as we possibly can. We're probably scaring the heck out of these fish here, but you know, they got to get used to human beings being around them, and most of these are tank raised, and they are. There are a few wild ones in here. Some of my cichlids are wild and not tank raised, so they're a little more skittish. There's one guy I'm a little worried about in this tank here because he hasn't eaten in the 3 days that I've had him in here. He came out of quarantine and just hasn't eaten anything that I've seen. Now, he may be eating some of the algae protein pellets that I put at the bottom in the evening when I'm not looking, because he seems to be behaving okay in the sense that he's not lethargic or anything like that, but I'm not seeing him much. He's hiding a lot. Now, that may change and whatever, but we're getting off the subject here. We're talking about this particular tank here and how we're going to finish this off as far as getting it to look exactly the way we want. Now, as I said, this is bothering me over here because of the lines that are cut lines on this piece of wood. They don't look natural to me, and I don't like that. I want everything to look as natural as I can. Like I said, I snapped these off up here for that very reason. I wanted these to hug. I wanted these to hug up against here to make it look like, you know, they're supposed to, like their roots growing up out and just sort of taking over the rock area. And in order to do that, you really have to have the ability to have the eye for it. Now, this one here has a cut line down here, but it doesn't bother me as much because the line is not so abrupt that it's just not something that somebody's just going to look at. And I can hide that so easy with just a couple of small little plants that are low growing. I can hide that really easily. I could probably do the same thing over here. Let's count our stones here, because I always like an odd number of stones. I don't like an even number of stones because in the rule of thirds or the golden ratio, the idea is to have things look as natural as they possibly can with the progression, either this way or towards the back. But when you're looking at it straight on, you have that triangular look going up, and we have achieved that. We've achieved it, and it looks really, really good. So I'm really happy with this so far, and I'm really excited about it. I think it's going to be one of the more interesting tanks that I've done, and I think with a little bit of messing around here and there, we're going to have a real beautiful scape here. And pretty much I've decided, you know, I was going to take this, I don't even know where it is right now. There was an extra piece of stone somewhere around here that I was going to break up. I don't know what I did with it, but it's around here somewhere. It's probably in the other room. But I was going to break that up and just sort of spread the pebbles down along here. But what I'm seeing is an opportunity to put, because we're going to be seeing this tank from all sides, except for the back, there is an opportunity for us to put just a few plants here and there that are going to really make this thing pop. And we're going to get into that part of this three-part series within the next couple of days here. I've got some plants that are coming. They're not here yet. I'm a little frustrated about that, but you know, we're living in a world right now that is very unpredictable and very hard to manage. And this is a first world problem. This is not a problem that most people would consider an issue at all. And I don't want anyone to think that I believe that in any way, shape, or form, that I deserve special treatment or should have things just kind of happen like that, because I don't. I understand what we're going through, and I think that when those plants show up in our next part of our series, we're going to be planting this tank. As I said, it's not going to be a heavily planted tank, and that is going to propose, I'm not proposing to anyone, that is going to pose a certain amount of problems with this build, because there's always the possibility of having your build not look correctly because you have not got the materials that you need, and the design that you had in mind has just sort of gone off in another direction, and you just have to have the ability to adapt. But we're going to be patient with this build, because this one, as I said, is going to be el natural. We are not going to do a quick cycle on this tank, even though I have the ability to do that. We are actually going to let this tank cycle in a way that is very natural. It's going to take 3 to 4 weeks to do that, but we've got to get our plants in here in order to start that process. And that's our next step to doing this, is cleaning all this up. Now, with Dragonstone, the last thing I want to talk about is you gotta wash the stone off, because it can be extremely nasty to work with if you don't. And what I mean by that is it has like an oily feeling to it anyway. It is a clay of sorts. It just has this beautiful look to it, but it is a clay of sorts. So we have to make sure that what we're doing with the stone is cleaning it up really well before we put it in the tank, and that gives us an opportunity to avoid that sheen that might develop on the top of it. Now, as I said, we're real close on this. We might even have one of these up here that is not going to, we're going to fix that right now. What we're going to basically do is we're going to snap this off and make it look natural. Now, that is for sure below the line, and we're not going to have any problems, and that's the end of that. So you don't want to cut those things off with a pair of nippers or anything like that, because the bottom line is, if you break it off, it looks more natural. It looks like nature did that, and it doesn't look like some guy came in there and just kind of buzzed it off or whatever. So I'm really happy with this so far. I think it's going to be beautiful, and I'm really looking forward to the 3-part series coming together. The last being that 3rd part where we plant this tank, we put some water in it, and we start that cycling process. Now, as I said, I don't have all of my plants. I wish I did, or we'd move right into that over the next day or two. But, you know, I'm expecting delivery of those plants in about 2 to 3 days. So if they come earlier than that, we'll go ahead and we'll start our build, and or not our build, but we'll start our planting, and we'll start our series on that. But thank you for joining me today. I hope you'll hit that like button. I hope you'll hit subscribe, and I do hope that you will leave some comments down below as to well, my goofiness, number one, because I'm not probably going to edit a whole lot of this, to be honest with you. this last part here is just sort of the way things happen. And I want people to see that it's not always perfect, that it is not always achievable to get everything to look chop, 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 you know, with your clipping of your film and stuff to make it look perfect, because you think you said something a little off color, or you didn't say something in the way you had hoped it would. And so I say to that, you know, let things be natural as best we can. We want nature in our aquariums. We want nature to come from us. I feel like I'm a pretty good speaker, and I'm a guy that's got a little bit of humor, so why not leave some of those little things in there? So the next part of this series, as I said, is going to be the planting of this aquarium, and we'll get that done, and I hope you'll join me. Again, like, subscribe, comment. I love reading the comments. They're so interesting, and they give me great ideas and great input as to what people like and don't like about these videos, and makes me just a better person at getting this creative side of me going in a way that I know that other people like as well. And that's what it's all about. It's all of us. Did you hear that? That's a sound you don't get to hear very often, and that is these Grommies in the back here, the little sparkling Grommies. The males, there's 2 males and a female in there, and they've been in there a long time, about almost a year and a half. But the males will sometimes sort of bump into each other in the tank, and they make this little clicking sound. If anybody has sparkling Grommies, they know exactly what I'm talking about, and it's a very cool sound. But I just heard that, and I thought I would mention. You might even be able to hear it on the video when I upload this. But anyways, for now, we're done with this part of it. I'm really happy with the way this turned out. I'm really, really excited at the next step of doing the planting in this, because that is going to be the most challenging, to get this to look a way that really, really makes me feel like it's one of the better tanks that I've ever done. So I hope you'll join me, and we'll be doing that real soon.